Hi, welcome back to the podcast. Even though I walk, I still am and continue to be your host, Steve Mills. In today's episode, I interviewed Carole Hickerson. Carole is a remarkable woman who brought the plight of the Vietnam POW MIA to the forefront of the American mind when at the time the United States government didn't want that to happen. I count it an honor and blessing to call her a dear friend. Now stay tuned. At the end of the podcast, I have a couple of books I'm going to recommend to you. One dives a little bit more into Jim and Carole's life and how they met, and the other is about the life of a POW at the Hanoi Hilton. I hope you enjoy the interview and podcast as much as I enjoyed interviewing Carole. Carole, thank you so much for being so gracious and willing to be interviewed again.
My pleasure.
This is the third time that we've talked. The first time, you were my very first podcast interview.
I was honored.
And everything that could go wrong did. The gardeners were there, dogs were barking, phone was ringing, babies crying, hot air balloons going by, you name it. It could happen, and it did. And then the second interview was audio only, and I really didn't feel comfortable with that. I wanted to capture you and the essence of you. And so again, thank you for being so gracious. Thank you for lunch yesterday.
Oh, hey, absolutely, Jim's and my pleasure. Steve.
Yeah, the food was good, but the pleasure always better. Tonight we'll have dinner as well. And people have asked me, well, why did you go back to Hawaii? And you asked me that yesterday. And I said, because of you and Jim. And Marty to a lesser extent, and some other folks.
The cat.
The cat. Yeah, Marty the cat. Should have been named Martha, but...
If he had been a girl, he would have been Martha, because we acquired him because of Martha, and we couldn't get out of getting another cat. We'd had one that passed away with old age, and so we've always had pets. That's part of our life, and even a dog, but our dog passed away, and we thought it'd be a little harder now to have a dog too. So here we are with just Marty.
Well, I'm sure Marty can be sweet at times. So we met in 2020, I think. And
around there, yeah.
We were living on Camp Smith, and you and some of our other friends would meet on Wednesdays at the Sunset Lanai for Mongolian barbecue.
Beautiful location.
And one of my coworkers, I went down to get some takeout food, and according to him, I was sitting there at the bar, just wasting away. I was sitting there at the bar, probably drinking a Diet Coke, waiting for the takeout food. Let's go with that. Okay. It was a Coke Zero.
A chaplain. That sounds better.
Yeah. He introduced us, and from that moment, we've just been family. Ohana.
We've been like this,
We have. Yep.
And with Sherry too.
And I had the privilege and honor of marrying your daughter.
Yes, indeed. An honor for us. And it's like, your family, your extended family, I don't even call it that, is taking care of you all the way around.
And to clarify, I'm not your son-in-law. My wife would have issues with that, but I officiated your daughter's wedding.
And we, especially in Hawaii, your extended family goes way beyond your blood family, because that's just the way it is in Hawaii.
It is, and that's why Hawaii is in my heart. It's in my blood, and I love coming back. But I love the people even more.
It's the people. We always have told people us ending up here. It's beautiful. The weather's always good, and we're isolated to some extent out in the middle of the Pacific Ocean, but it's the people that kept us here.
Yeah. And as usual, over the years, the things that you and Jim have gone through, especially when Jim was a POW in Vietnam, and you'd heard that you got the news that your husband, Steve Hansen, was MIA. It was the people that got you through that, right?
Oh, absolutely. And my family, especially.
Yeah.
I was blessed to have family around me that just supported me and cared for me. And my parents, my growing up years were just I never realized how super good it was until I went to college and met people that didn't have the same kind of upbringing. And it was really not until then that I realized how fortunate and blessed I was to have been raised by the parents with an extended family around me, grandparents and cousins and great grandparents. And I mean, just I was blessed in so many ways that I really didn't realize until I got out in the world a little bit and saw that all of my friends didn't have it that way.
Yeah, very blessed indeed.
Yes, indeed.
And even through the trials and tribulations, the tears, always blessed.
But they were with me all the way.
Yeah.
And I'll always be thankful for that.
And you have been with people all the way as well. You've journeyed a lot
Well,
with others.
you try and you hope you're helping in some way. Sometimes you're aware of things you after the fact that you maybe could have done, and that always makes me feel badly. But I mean, once you've been in need like I was, or Jim was, you realize that you can be helpful to other people.
Yeah. So let's talk a little bit about Carole's upbringing, her childhood, journey to college, where you met Steve, and then we'll transition and talk a little bit about, or talk a lot about, your effort during the Vietnam War in bringing the fight of the POWs and MIAs to the forefront, because you and a host of other wives, and I assume maybe some girlfriends, were the dynamo that started a movement. So let's tell us a little bit about your upbringing.
Okay, well, I'm my parents. My mom came from a family that was, fairly wealthy, um, but brought themselves up by their bootstraps, so to speak. This is hard to imagine, but my grandpa, um, he came to California when he was 9 years old. He had lost his mom, and his dad remarried, and there were 5 boys. They weren't happy with the stepmom, and they decided, probably more decision by the oldest son, but they decided they were going to California. California was where the gold rush then, and all kinds of good things going on. So the oldest brother came to California first, started sending for his younger brothers, and my grandpa came as a 9-year-old with his 6-year-old brother on the train by themselves from Connecticut to Southern California. It's hard to imagine this day and age. No. And anyway, they invested their money. They did very well, bought property. The 29 Depression did them in, so they went from being very comfortable to struggling some. But like I say, my mom came from a wealthier family than my dad, and my dad didn't even finish high school. Very smart guy, but because such a poor family. To give you an idea, he and his brother at one time, they were so poor that they ate birdseed to get by physically.
My goodness.
Yeah. And my grandpa on that side, had all these children, and he put them the boys into a home for boys, and not to be adopted, but just because he couldn't take care of them. And so when my mom and my dad met, she was from a higher, echelon financially as far as her family than my dad. But anyway, they got married and moved to Burbank, California when I was 3 years old. And uh, they got to the point that my folks said they wanted to buy a house. So they went looking in the San Fernando Valley, found a house in Burbank, put $10 down to hold it, and they lived there for well over 50 years in that house. Selling that house when they couldn't take care of it anymore was very difficult, but many, many happy, happy memories. My sister Joan, 5 years younger than me, but we were very close growing up. I used to tell her stories about, visiting fairies. If she closed her eyes, they were there, and but we were very close, even though there was 5 years between us, and we still are very, very close. She and her husband Gary live in Montana, so we're not close together, but we are close nevertheless. And so, my upbringing as far as all the way through high school was right there in Burbank. I then went to college, graduated from San Jose State College. Uh, Not too many miles is another college, St. Mary's College, and uh, my parents allowed me to, my senior year, to live in an all-girl apartment complex. That was the only reason I could live there, all girls. And I had three roommates, and there was a basketball game between St. Mary's and San Jose. And I had been out on another date, and I came back, and uh, they had invited the basketball team from St. Mary's to come over for refreshments. Now, I have to tell you, our refreshments were saltine crackers with jam and jelly on them. That was all we could afford. I think the guys bought, in fact, I know the guys bought some beer, but that was the extent.
Well, beer and saltine crackers,
right,
that's a crazy time right there.
Yeah, right. And there was one poor soul, of course, there weren't enough seats in our small apartment, and there was a guy sitting under our desk in the living room, and that turned out to be Steve Hansen. And we got to talking, and that was the beginning of our romance. He didn't have a car. He would cajole, friends of his at St. Mary's to come down to San Jose, and that's we wrote letters. Of course, no internet or cell phones then, and we dated, and then after we both had graduated, got married. And that was about the beginning of the Vietnam War.
Okay.
And Steve had always been interested in aviation. He grew up in Oxnard, California, and close to the Air Force Base there. And his dad even built him a platform on their clothesline, which of course clotheslines are a thing of the past. But he would climb up there and watch the planes land at the base there. So he always, and I don't know why, he didn't have aviation in his family. His dad was a banker, so it wasn't that he came with it through the family, but he loved aviation from the time he was a little boy, and volunteered at the beginning of not the beginning, but Vietnam War, to go into the Marine Corps, and got accepted at the flight school down in Pensacola, Florida, and went through flight training. And just before that, we did get married. And so the two of us, went down there. And he did real well in flight training, and all of his class, there was such a need in Vietnam for helicopters, so his whole class went helicopter. So he was a helicopter pilot. Uh, had very little time in the United States before he was sent to Vietnam, and was there for, well, we were going to get together at an R&R, which they allowed to do at that time. I was pregnant when he left for Vietnam, and had our son Todd while he was still gone. And one of the saddest parts for our marriage was that Todd never got to see his dad, and Steve never got to see Todd.
So what happened to Steve?
Well, Steve was on a mission at that time. We were not supposed to be in Laos, but we were. And so I tried to find out where his helicopter had gone down, and I didn't find out that it was in Laos until after the war.
Mm-hmm.
And that was through one of his squadron mates. But, it was difficult standing on at the wharf watching he left on a carrier, not a carrier. They took the helicopters with them on a ship,
Mm-hmm.
and that we never made it to the R&R. He would have been able to, to meet his son had that occurred. But
And walk us through the timeline here. Uh, how far along were you when Steve left, and then how far along were you when you got the news that he was missing in action?
okay, Todd was born 2 weeks after Steve left for Vietnam, and Steve was shot down on the 3rd of June, and Todd would have been a year old in September,
Mm-hmm.
so he was just a few months under
Mm-hmm.
under 1 year old.
Okay. You get the news, and then what happens? Then what do you do with that?
Cry a lot.
Yeah.
Yeah, and um, I can see it in my mind to this day. I was teaching second grade. I went back to teaching to get my life credential in California. Uh, Full intentions of being a stay-at-home mom for a while anyway. But I was teaching second grade in Burbank, and the principal came in and asked me to come down to his office, not giving any kind of indication that there was anything wrong. And we were getting ready for an open house or something that was big coming up at the school, and so there was a sub that came in to watch my kids, and I went down to his office, chatting all the way about school stuff. Walked into his office and saw two Marine Corps officers in their dress uniforms. And that's, when it hit me. Now, my first thought was that he's been killed. And I remember their words exactly. We're not here to tell you that he's been killed. We're here to tell you he's missing in action.
Mm-hmm.
Well, your mind just goes all over the place, but it sticks with, well, they're going to find him in a few days. He's fine. Say your prayers, Carol. But the days turned into weeks, the weeks turned into months, and no news, absolutely no news. And we were told by the government that for the sake of our husbands, do not talk about this situation. Don't tell them what's happened. Don't say anything. Well, that's hard in the beginning, but as the days and months go on, that becomes harder and harder.
Yeah. Hey, we're going to take a break for just a minute, and when we come back, I want us to talk about, so you got the news, and like you said, the days turned into weeks, weeks into months, months into years, but you just didn't sit idly by. You got yourself busy, and you brought together an army or a corps of folks to attack this head on. So we'll be right back.
Okay.
You've gotten the news, and now describe what force of nature Carole is.
Well, I have to start out by saying it was difficult to get started because remember we're going against the government, and for the most part, um, a military wife is a pretty law-abiding citizen. So going against what your government tells you is difficult. It really is. And I didn't know anybody else. There was no one in my neighborhood or in any area close by that was in the same situation, and we probably wouldn't have known each other anyway because we were all told. be quiet. So I made the decision to try, and basically it was to change the government's policy because it didn't seem to me that being quiet about the issue of the POWs or MIAs was doing one bit good. There was no mail out of the prison camps. There was no list. The North Vietnamese were not abiding by the Geneva Convention, which has certain things, a country is supposed to do in regards to POWs lists, humane treatment, which of course that didn't happen at all. But any of those things we assumed were not being followed, and we knew as far as mail that, even known POWs were the wives were not getting mail. So what I decided to do, and you have to, go back and realize that there was no internet, there was none of the technology that we kind of take for granted. So I went to the newspaper, or went to the library, and of course there were many more newspapers then than there are now. Mm-hmm. People get their news in different ways now, but there are, at that time, there were many newspapers. And I pulled up all the newspapers in the United States, and I found 350 approximately, and I composed a letter to send to the editors of the newspapers. And what the letter was explaining the situation, what the North Vietnamese weren't doing as far as what they were supposed to do according to the Geneva Convention. And I got a PO box, so I didn't have to use my home address, and asked people to write to their congressman and senator, and write to the president of North Vietnam, and express their views of that they wanted information, how, what could be gathered was very poor treatment. Anyway, of course, I have no way of knowing how many people responded to that letter that was sent from the newspaper. But the point is, in addition to whatever number of people, wrote, is that other wives saw my letter and, started responding and communicating with me my box number. And it was like, finding a gold mine to find other wives that were going through the same situation as I was. So little by little, the word was getting out to the public as well as us connecting with each other. And we established regional contacts where we contacted each other. I already had a PO box, but otherwise do the same thing, so people could contact us through, a PO box number, and it just grew. I mean, it grew bigger and bigger, and more people became aware and involved, and I had one speaking engagement after another with a group that would listen to me, the Kiwanis, the Rotary Club, this club, that club, churches. I mean, and then I wasn't the only one. There was a number of us that got started early on. And as it grew, other wives, of course, became involved. And a thing that really turned it is, and I always kind of think, what was that meeting like when the president, who of course was Nixon at the time, and his entourage sat down and said, what are we going to do with these wives? They're getting louder and louder, so maybe we should change our policy. And they did. And there was a big press conference. I was invited. I think there were about 5 of us wives standing around President Nixon, and he brought up, how terrible the North Vietnamese had been and were, and lack of information, no letters, the whole 9 yards. And of course, that was a huge help to us. I mean, now we were legal.
Yeah.
All of a sudden.
And how long had Steve been gone when that happened?
He had you know, it was, oh, 3 years, maybe 2 years. I
Wow.
have to stop and think about it.
Yeah.
But we all followed the rules, so to speak, for quite some time. And it just, of course, when the government changed its policy, and they were on board, and the government then was a big help to us.
Hmm.
We ended up forming an organization. We were using our own money, of course, to begin with. And I started a bumper sticker campaign. Bumper stickers were real big at the
Mhm.
time. Of don't let them be forgotten. POWs and MIAs, put my box number on it, and I would go to these meetings with a stack of bumper stickers, a bunch of uh, things to fill out, letters, petitions, all kinds of things to these meetings. And somebody that came along with us besides really the government was Ross Perot. And he put money into it, which of course was helpful to us.
Mhm.
And he created a movie, and of course you have to go back to, you had the big reels and the tape, and I carried my projector with me, plus all this other stuff to meetings. So.
And now it's all on a phone.
Yeah, it was all on a phone, and no cell phones either. But I'd take all that stuff with me, and you never knew exactly what response you were getting. I mean, it was positive, 99.5%. It was all positive, and amazement and surprise because people didn't know about the issue. I mean, it had been kept quiet for so long that, any information going out was just brand new news to most people. And as I was saying, Ross Perot got involved and he made these movies, a couple of short movies that we would take with us that showed the conditions in North Vietnam. He had a mock-up of a prison cell, and I mean that the visual, of course, helps a lot.
Sure.
Yeah, yeah. So I mean, like I say, 99.5% of those we spoke to were so supportive. Now there were a couple of things that were downsides.
Mhm.
One was a group of women. I don't know, I can't remember what the organization was, and I wouldn't even say if I knew, but I got there with all my paraphernalia, and the president of the group came out and said, "Oh, it's Christmas time, and we don't really want to hear a sad story, so
Oh my goodness.
we're gonna, say we're not ready for you." Yeah, now, you can talk about getting hit right between the eyes, turn around
Yeah.
and go home with all my gear and be
Mm.
turned off like that,
Yeah. And you didn't know it at the time, but Steve had been killed. So you're doing all of this for him, but there's another guy that was a POW. And if I remember the story correctly, and please let me know if it's wrong, but somehow the prisoners heard of this lady, Carole Hansen, who had been doing all of this stuff and got these wives together and were getting better conditions for them. And he said, "Man, if I ever get out of here, I want to find that lady and thank her." And he did find that lady a little bit later, and he did thank you. And we'll get to that part later.
Yeah.
But so your efforts were helping so many here in the States, but also getting better treatment for them.
Yeah, and saying I was doing it for Steve, of course I was doing it for Steve, hoping and praying that he was alive. And I took that tack and I went to church, a church, I didn't care which denomination it was, every day to say my prayers for him, but also for the whole group.
Mhm.
We worked together. The wives really supported each other so completely, which that's hard to find a group of women.
Yeah.
But
Then, as it goes along, the Vietnam War comes to an end. The organization, what happens with the organization?
The organization stayed intact and it still exists because there are still MIA families that want some, uh, resolve to their issue. Now it's more working towards the identification of remains.
Mm-hmm.
And right here in Hawaii, the lab, DPAA, is where remains come and are identified. Steve's remains didn't come back till 2000.
Wow.
Yeah, lost in 67.
Mm-hmm.
And he is what existed, which that amount of time is, not a whole uh, amount of remains, but he's buried at Arlington,
Mm-hmm.
which was a wonderful service that they performed for him. And I've always said and said, a long time ago when I was still waiting, you don't appreciate a funeral so much until you don't have one. And the waiting and wondering and hoping and praying, that's difficult,
Mm-hmm.
you know.
Yeah. Yeah, it's and especially not knowing.
Yeah.
But you did find out officially that he'd been killed in action. And when was that?
Well, that was his remains came back in 2000, but uh, I was very fortunate, and this seems kind of strange to say, but one of his crew members did survive and was, as a POW in North Vietnam, taken to North Vietnam. They did not disclose the names of any of those that were lost outside of North Vietnam. So a crew member, did survive the torture and everything in the prison camps in North Vietnam. But we just had our 50th anniversary for their homecoming.
Mm.
And Jim and I went and uh, got to talk to that, uh, um, crew member. But going back to the beginning again, when the POWs came home, I was invited to a dinner that the White House had for the POWs, and the crew member was there, and he sought me out, and he told me then, and that was right after the POWs came home, that he knew that Steve had not survived.
Mm-hmm.
He had lost his life in the initial firefight that as soon as the helicopter had gone down. He survived the crash, but he didn't survive the onslaught of the troops that killed him. But, like I say, it's hard to say that's a blessing, but it was because I found out that he,
Mm-hmm.
wasn't alive. And little by little, I began to be able to go on with my life. For Todd's sake, more than anything else, probably.
Yeah, and again, the wave of emotions, the sense of relief, and then guilt. Why am I feeling this sense of relief? I shouldn't, but I am. And then, as you say, little by little, day by day, life, I don't know, ever gets back to normal, but you start living a little bit more of your life.
Well, and because I had a son, and I saw in some families where it became their way of life. And there are families now that's they've passed it on down to their children. So the children are living the miserable life now. And I didn't want that for Todd. I didn't want to put that around his neck, so to speak.
Yeah. So let's fast forward a little bit. You were invited to go to an event in Dallas, put on by H. Ross Perot, and it was there. You were there with a date, right?
Well, it wasn't a date, but there was in fact, I got invited mainly because I got to be kind of well known in the POW camp. An interview in 2020, I believe, that they had done with some of the wives, and it was when I was chairman of the National League of Families. So I'm sure that's the only reason I got invited because my feeling was that we needed to support our government because it would be very demoralizing to our husbands if they were getting lots of stuff, from the news media condemning the United States. And that did happen. I mean, they got all the anti-war, all the leftist propaganda. I mean, that stuff went into the camps. It didn't take 24 hours to get in there. But I was invited to be on this program, and I said, interestingly enough, became kind of the mantra of the POWs to come home with honor, which they did. And I said in the course of the interview that I knew my husband Steve was still hoping that he was alive, would want to come home with honor because he, supported his country, and that's the way he would have wanted to come home. So that interview, and why they didn't cut me out, I don't know, because every other wife was anti-war, anti-government. But that interview went through to the POW camp, and so I kind of became, a little bit of an icon for good stuff. Which still just, I mean, it was just so small, but they took small things and to attach their hope with, And so when I got home, or when they got home, I got calls from a lot of
let me back up just a minute, because that's a part of the story that I hadn't heard before. You did an interview, or a bunch of wives were interviewed.
Yes.
Most of them were anti-war.
Yes.
They interviewed you.
Yes.
Not anti-war.
Right.
Supported the government.
The only one out of the crowd.
The video somehow made its way to North Vietnam.
Yes, I don't know how.
They showed the video to the POWs.
Well, it was probably a transcript, would be my guess.
Okay.
I think,
And they didn't realize that, hey, there's this one person that's positive.
Yeah. The bad apple in the group.
That's amazing how you were able to slip through that and give them a sense of hope.
Well, and from my standpoint, it was such a small, tiny little thing I did on that program. And I mean, what happened when they came home was truly a gift because I got a lot of calls. I ended up getting invited to that dinner at the White House. How they could be so appreciative for such a little teeny tiny thing I did.
And that's why you're so gracious.
Well,
it wasn't a teeny tiny thing. And then it's like I said at lunch yesterday, you and Jim are my heroes. And you said, we're not a hero. And I said, heroes don't think they are.
No, neither one of us consider ourselves heroes.
You're giants.
Well, you do what you know is right in your heart when the time comes. Whatever it is, I mean, it happened to be the Vietnam War and standing up for the POWs for me, but people do that for all kinds of things throughout their lives,
Well, you are a very special person.
No.
So you go to this, you had dinner at the White House. Who was at your table?
Well, I only remember Dave, oh God, it's been a long time. I was with a POW that invited me. I had worked with his family, and he wasn't married, but he didn't have a girlfriend. He wanted to go to that dinner, and I was a friend of the family, and so I'm sure they discussed it, and he decided he would ask Carole Hickerson. So that's who I went with.
Okay.
It's terrible. Yeah, a long time ago. Anyway.
Yeah. And then you went to the event in Dallas.
Yes, got invited by another POW whose wife had not waited for him. He was going through a hard time, had children. He wasn't being able to, see his children. And I was still hurting at that time. So he asked me to go to this event at the Cotton Bowl, and I wasn't going to go. I mean, I was still hurting myself, and it's my mom that talked me into going. And it happened to be on the 3rd of June, which made it even harder for me because Steve was shot down on the 3rd of June. So I was very hesitant to go, but my mom was very convincing, and so okay, I
Now we
went.
know where you get it from.
Yeah. Yeah, so I went, and the event was for all vets. The POWs were kind of the honored group and were seated on the floor of the Cotton Bowl. And so we filed in. There was no assigned seating, but we filed in, and Jim Bell was who I went with. And he was on my right. I'm sitting here, and of course there were, wives and singles and across all the seating. And next to me was a gentleman I didn't know. Uh, and next to him was his wife had not waited, and his friends had found a gal for him to take to this event. So the four of us were right pretty much in the center of the whole crowd. And as you probably remember, the song that became, and it was a big event. I mean, Bob Hope was the MC, and all the big stars, John Wayne, and all kinds of big stars were there. But anyway, Tony Orlando and Dawn, anybody remembers that long ago, but Tony Orlando had a song that kind of became the song for the POWs, and it was Tie a Yellow Ribbon. And of course, it talks about coming home. Well, of course, I had heard the song, and how to, hurt yourself. I watched every homecoming, because they'd show it over and over again of the POWs walking off the planes and all. But that song became the POWs kind of, mantra as far as their song. So Tony Orlando is singing his song, and I'm kind of holding back the tears, but they're kind of running down my cheek anyway. And I'm blinking, and this gentleman sitting to my left, he kind of leans over and gives me a little kiss on the cheek. And he turned out to be Jim Hickerson. And I can see that picture in my mind to this day.
Wow.
Now, we both have done a lot of speaking afterwards, a lot of times together, and he loved to tell the crowd, at the end of his speech, that most expensive kiss he ever gave.
I've heard that from him a time or two.
Yeah. And one would never ever guess from that day on. We dated, and he got to know Todd, and Todd got to the point he wanted to call him Dad, and can't believe that it's almost 50 years ago, and our anniversary, 50-year anniversary, is coming up the 14th of December.
Oh my
Which
goodness.
is hard to believe.
That is amazing. And see that journey and see how God works in all of that. How He works in the pain. He works in the joy, but He works in the pain as well.
He's with you all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And he's been good for my faith, and I've always said that. Anybody, that's what carries me through. All those prayers every day. And like I said, I went into every denomination that was there, lit candles in Catholic churches, kneeled in Catholic churches, sat in little tiny churches, great big churches. At that time, churches were open usually through the night. I don't think that's the case anymore, but that was a respite for me, and did a whole lot for me, when I was very needy.
Absolutely. And the scripture, even though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death or deepest darkness, I fear no evil, for you are with me.
Yeah,
Your rod and your staff, they guide and protect me. And that is so true.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah. Absolutely. Yeah.
So then you and the highly esteemed Captain Hickerson get married. Does he adopts Todd? Or
Yes, right away he
okay,
adopted Todd, and we adopted two more.
right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah.
Jenny and uh,
Jim Jr.
Jim
Yeah,
Jr. JJ,
yeah.
right?
Well, no, he goes by Jim.
Oh, okay,
JJ is the grandson.
that's right.
Yeah, yeah.
Too many J's and Jims in your
Oh,
family.
we've got Jenny, Jimmy. You talk about. We've got Jay's. Yeah.
But at least you have Todd.
Yeah.
And then life goes on. Uh, Jim retires from the Navy and goes to work. You all settle down. You're going to move to Hawaii for just a couple of years or so, and you've been here for how long?
About 20.
About 20 years.
Yeah.
And recently moved from your house into the Ivy. Life has taken some other twists and turns.
Big turn. Big
Yep.
turn. Yeah.
And again, in all of that, just having lunch with you yesterday, walking to the dining room, you were just talking with people, and people were coming up, and it's just you are an amazing person, and they see a genuine love that you have.
Well, it's a chance here. It's a new opportunity to interface with people, some of them in need. And, I've tried to learn names. I complimented people on, gals that have a pretty shirt on or something. Because, especially in this kind of a setting, and there's some people that are so much worse off than we are. And to say something nice to them, it's something that they'll remember that day.
It costs nothing, right?
It costs
It
nothing.
costs nothing to be
Yeah.
nice to people.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah. So let's talk about Jim a little bit. He was an A-7 pilot.
Yeah.
In the Navy, was shot down and taken POW for 5.5 years. He can tell you the exact time, about 5.5. And when he was released and got home or went to the Philippines for the first stop, I remember he was standing in the food line and guys were just piling food on, and he was like, "You're taking too long," and so he grabbed a chocolate eclair, and that was the first thing that he'd eaten.
That he ate that was halfway decent.
And he said that was the best thing he'd ever eaten in his life. But then he gets home and he's stationed at Lemoore, right? And gets home and discovers that his wife had not waited for him, and they divorced shortly after. And then again, he goes on with life, and then meets you, and getting to know you all for the last 4 years, I guess, 4 or 5 years. That's crazy. Yeah, what a blessing for us. And every Wednesday night at Murphy's, we have our little group that we get together with. We had that at the Sunset Lanai. And again, it is just a privilege. I want to thank you for your time. You are very kind and gracious to do this for the third time, and there may be a fourth or fifth. We don't know yet. But is there anything else you'd like to say? Any closing thoughts or words?
Well, I don't know whether you want to use this. I'd like to talk a little bit about, our adoption of two more children.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah. Well, just, and I probably put it in someplace, but when Jim and I got married and we had Todd, but neither one of us had ever wanted just one child. I don't always think it's the best for that one child. So we were going to have some more children. Didn't have any luck ourselves, so we decided to adopt. And we went through a Navy chaplain that we had known on the USS America, and we were putting out feelers to different, organizations, or we talked to an organization where it was for adoption. And then this chaplain, we mentioned it to him. Well, he came up with a situation for us. He had a family in Virginia Beach that he knew. They had a 17-year-old daughter that was scheduled for an abortion the following day. And the chaplain talked the family out of going ahead with the abortion. So Jim, our son, who is a wonderful, caring adult, good kid he was, and really a giving soul himself now, uh, he missed being aborted by about 12 hours.
Wow.
Yeah, yeah. And our daughter, Jenny, we were going to a Presbyterian church where we were seeing a lot of little Asian children running around, and we still were, looking to adopt again. And we found out that they had the county, I believe it was, of Ventura, had kind of a direct conduit with a adoption agency in Korea. And of course, you have to go back 40 something years. Korea was a very, very poor country at that time, and there were a lot of children being put up for adoption and being adopted by families in the United States. So, anyway, we sought that out, and we just asked that she be younger than Jim because we didn't want to take his place, in the family. And she's 5 months younger than Jim. But she was abandoned in a bus station and was in an orphanage and came, as a 5-year-old, couldn't speak a word of English. Is the most well-adjusted American you'd ever want to find out,
Okay, so let me get this straight. Okay, your first husband was shot down and killed, and you started a movement that went international, and we left out a lot of details.
Right.
Your world travels,
Oh, yeah.
meeting with
Many
dignitaries.
countries. And,
You met with Kissinger. John Wayne would bring Todd presents. He wore
we came up with the POW bracelet.
the bracelet. He wore the Steve's bracelet. You met and married Jim Hickerson. Met by chance. Then you did all this stuff. You adopted a child that was going to be aborted within 12 hours. You adopted a young child that was abandoned in a bus stop in Korea. Carole, when are you going to do something with your life?
Well, I think now there's still got to be something to do at ages 86 and 90. I don't know.
My goodness, but you know what we haven't talked about? The flag.
Oh, that's right. Yeah.
Yeah. So we're going to take a little break, and then what? All right. Well, we're back. We've changed locations. We're in your office where there's some memorabilia and some awards and flags and such on here. And we've talked about the lady. Now we want to talk about the flag that's behind us. You had a huge part in it. You helped design some of the letters. The first silhouette was of your husband, Steve. And one of my most valued treasures that I have in my house is a flag signed by you to your favorite chaplain from my favorite Carole with an E. And I used to have it hanging in my home gym, and when I would walk in, I would just give a little nod to Steve, thank him for his sacrifice, and offer a prayer for you. Recently, I was in DC with a group called Forever Young Veterans, and we took a group of Vietnam veterans to the different memorials and museums, and it was very healing for them. One of them on the last night said, "This is the welcome home I didn't get 55 years ago."
So true.
While we were there, we went to the wall, and I made a beeline for somebody, and I imposed his name on this, Stephen P. Hansen, and I didn't know that you had one, but lost it 20 years ago.
Right. We had a warehouse fire with our belongings that were in storage. Jim was at the Army War College, and that's a year course.
Mm-hmm.
We were just about to retrieve all our belongings to ship to California, which was his next duty station. And the warehouse burned down before our things were to be packed up and moved. So thank you, Steve.
Well, you're welcome. I had no idea. But now maybe the circle is complete.
Yes.
All right.
appreciate it so much.
You bet. So I would encourage you, when you see a Vietnam veteran, thank them for their service, offer to buy them a cup of coffee or a soda. When you look at the flag, think about your freedom. Think about the men and women who have served and sacrificed and have given so much so that we can have free elections. I've lived in different places around the world, and not every country gets a vote. Not every person gets to decide who their leader is going to be. And whoever you voted for doesn't matter. But what matters is we have the freedom to do so. And in large part because of Steve Hansen, Jim Hickerson, and this young, beautiful lady here.
Oh.
Hey, thanks for listening. Carole is an incredible person and continues to inspire to this day. If you'd like to read more about how she and Jim met and several others in a book called Captured by Love, it's fascinating and tells the story of several couples that met as they were POWs. And then another book, Prisoner of War, 6 Years in the Hanoi Hilton, by Lieutenant Commander John McGrath. Highly recommend this book. It's very short, but very powerful. I appreciate you tuning in. Be sure to like and subscribe, and be on the lookout for new episodes.